Hello, everyone, and welcome into OneSoccer Direct. Eddie Petrillo, Jordan Wilson, and Gareth Wheeler with you. Gentlemen, were we watching soccer? Were we watching a UFC bout? We're not quite sure, but what we do know is Canada walked away with the 2-0 win over El Salvador. They will move on to the quarters to face Guatemala. But yeah, I'm still trying to wrap my head around how horrible El Salvador were. And this could be a different tune today, gentlemen. If a Canadian player was majorly injured, thank goodness everyone seemed to walk away unscathed. But what did you make, Wheels, of them trying to turn this into a street fight?
I had this bit planned and I completely dropped the ball. I was going to come on with Band-Aids just all over my face like I'd been in a scrap. I was going to tear them off and throw them to the ground. Because that's kind of what it felt like last night. It felt more like survival more so than anything else. That was a painful watch. Like, as a football fan, as a football supporter, you see some games that are absolute dogs. That one had an incredible bark. Woof, woof. Like, honestly, it started off completely disjointed, and then it turned into a foul fest, which then immediately took a hard right to legitimate concern. Those were pig challenges, like just awful challenges that could have really put some Canadian players in vulnerable positions. And that's not what you want to see when you're playing for your national team. You want to have these players, many of them whose futures are a little bit up in the air right now, be able to play with confidence, play an actual game of football, and not that mixed martial arts stuff that we were seeing out there on the field. I do think that in a roundabout way, it's the ultimate compliment to Canada because El Salvador is not good enough. They couldn't hang with the Canadians, so they resorted to that, which didn't work out anyways, and got even worse. Like, it was unsustainable. If you're going to go out there and persistently foul that way, then you're going to have players sent off. And I thought the referee did a decent job. And El Salvador ran out of steam, were humiliated based upon the way that they played. And they only completed 17 passes the entire second half. So they got what they deserved. It's one of those where you just want to thank the footballing gods that no one was significantly injured, and then you move on from that, just get on with it, because that's something that we don't want to see in this region on a regular basis.
In the game we all love, you two know this better than anyone as well, there are hard fouls, and then there's intent to injure. And I thought El Salvador reached the line and crossed the line far too much. I'm all about an elbow. Like, if it's fair, like not one of these, but like where you're going in shoulder to shoulder, you're throwing your body about. But like the point where El Salvador played and started the match, like the first tackle Schaffenberg got, the yellow on Ortiz, that could have been a red straight there. Like, studs up. The intent was not to play the ball or intimidate. The intent was to injure. And even if it wasn't, they're trying to go and say, oh, this is the line. We want to make sure that our physicality is known. Like, what people say, take the lid off. Like, you guys are going far too reckless into challenges. And for me, it was just a bit classless if you look at this match. Like, I understand, to Wheels' point, they're not the most talented team, but still, like, the respect for the game and sportsmanship, like, you don't go wild like that and try to end careers. Like, this was a bit too much for me.
Do you know the worst one? The worst ones, and it happened throughout that game. Whoever that striker was, honestly, if he was on the field, I would have complete the undercut. Like, Derek Cornelius folded up like an accordion. He did it multiple times, by the way. Yeah. That's targeted. That is so dirty. Honestly, Jordan, if you're that player's teammate, I'm having a word and say, dude, like, this is your reputation. Like, who's going to want to go to battle with you when you're taking liberties, cheap shots at players? That's what really bothered me. There were some of those, the scissor challenges, the late challenges, the high challenges. But when a player goes up like that, Jordan, completely offside. Honestly, it was disgusting.
It's the worst. It was like, it's worse getting undercut. Go ahead, Andy. Sorry.
It was garbage play, whatever the game plan was for El Salvador. And I do agree with you, Wheels. Like, we sit here and we talk about, like, it's a compliment because typically when teams can't hang with you, that's usually what they resort to. But I felt like when I was watching that game that it was back in the 90s. I don't think we should be accepting that anymore. And to your
Yeah.
point, there's one thing when you're tackling because you can't keep up, your speed isn't there, you're tugging on shirts. Like it's very obvious. And then it's also very obvious when you're trying to go out and hurt. And I don't know, Concacaf, if there's just something they could do where they turn around and it's when you rewatch a game and you look at things and it's so blatant that there's no attempt to play the ball, that there's no attempt to actually play the sport. Maybe the federation gets fined at that point. Maybe you just start handing out fines and just saying, listen, if you paid for it on the field with your red cards, you lost, you're out, pack your bags, go home. But I don't want us, like, that's what I mean. I think things would be different. Heaven forbid, should Jonathan David have broken a leg. We would have been calling for their president to be resigning, for crying out loud. But I don't want it to get to that point. So now CONCACAF, I believe, should start sending messages that type of play is not going to be accepted, and you start fining the federation.
Well, I do agree with you, Andy. There is a potential knock-on effect here, and we've seen it before. Club teams, big clubs who now have star players playing in CONCACAF, how enthused are they to send their players over to play when this sort of junk is happening? We've already seen the little bit of the distrust. Like flying across the Atlantic, it might be perceived as snobbery, but there is different elements to the game that's played over here than there is in European football. So this affects relationships. This affects potentially player availability. So you're right. CONCACAF will clamp down on some of the procedural stuff that Canada and Marsh got involved in earlier in the week. People are divided about that stance, but this is one where the competition committee needs to have a word. It's their own brand. I think CONCACAF is doing a nice job building out some really important competitions, and overall, the standard continues to raise. But games like that and performances like that, you're right, it sets back all the progress that's being had. So I wouldn't be surprised if the competition committee has a word or two to all teams to ensure that junk like this doesn't play out on a regular basis. You can't entirely foolproof it, and El Salvador are rightfully going home, but certainly you can send a little bit of a message behind the scenes to ensure that this is a rarity and not the regular.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to investigate Jesse Marsh for, may or may not using nasty language towards an official, and then we had to witness that. Investigate, do something. So did we learn anything here, Jordan? When you look at Canada's performance, so 2-0, as I mentioned earlier, they win. What did we learn, if anything, from that game?
I mean, in a game with 2 reds in the first half, we'll just go over that. A game of a missed penalty by Jonathan David. I'll focus on a bit of the things that we can't ignore. Jonathan David is the most influential player on this program. We can argue and go to a point about ever, real soon, for Jonathan David. But like, Wheels, well, you've talked about this before, but you mentioned it in this game as well. Like you're kind of saying is who's going to be the difference maker to score a goal, and he does it the hard way. We'll talk about Chouinier's peach of a pass for that first goal. The fact that he does like the Ronaldinho, like no look. But for him to take a touch with the left, slot it in the bottom corner with the right, he's just different class. Another thing I have to mention and what we learned, or I guess was reaffirmed in this match, was Derek Cornelius. Yeah, he's getting undercut. Yes, it was a game where El Salvador aren't great going forward. They didn't want to play football. But just what he brings, the fact that he has the brains and the bronze, the fact that he's a complete center back and he knows Jesse Marsh's system, if you really want to compete and you really want to make it far in this tournament, he's going to have to play substantial minutes and lead in that back line because he just changes everything for me. I think the biggest thing from yesterday in the UFC MMA street fight was that they were brave. And the one thing I want to speak about, I always talk to you guys about, back when I played, I was the one to go and get hits. But you know what happens when you get crunched? You start thinking about, oh, shoot, the next time someone comes, like, are they going to get me? And am I not going to stand my ground, or am I going to jump out of a tackle? They didn't really do that. Canada kind of said, we know what's coming and we're going to stay there. We're going to stand our ground. We're going to make sure. And I think that's brave because in a situation with all that's on the line, think about Tajon Buchanan. Think about so many players that have come back from injury and know how long that could be. They didn't let that affect their game. They still kind of approached it the same way. So for that, we learned this team's really locked in. Richie Larea didn't lose his head, even though the El Salvadorians did everything to get him off his game. He stood his ground and kept his cool. Like, they had 2 yellows and the Figueroa and Promise David, but for me, that was yellows that of playing the game. It wasn't from retaliating or making sure that the El Salvadorians got in the head. They stood their ground. So for that, I'm proud of them.
Yeah, the temperament was really good. They could have been dragged into, I mean, they were part of it, but they persevered through it. Thought the leadership was very good. Typically, you'd see Jesse Marsh being very emotional. He was composed. And I give the manager a lot of credit for that because that's a little bit out of character for Jesse Marsh, especially based upon some of the theatrics that we've seen before. But he led his team appropriately. Even late in the game when Ismail Kone was getting involved, the camera cut to him and Marsh was saying, use your head. Like it was really good leadership with the manager, and I think that there was a knock-on value of having him back on the touch line as well. And Jordan touched on the other thing, Jonathan David. He is the most irreplaceable player in this Canada squad. There's no doubt about it. AGR, Ollie, and I were chatting yesterday, and they were speculating if you give Jonathan David a rest. I don't think Jesse Marsh believes he can because he's the most reliable player in that 11. I think he's the first name on the team sheet, and that includes Alphonso Davies when he's fit too. Davies is the poster boy. He's the most talented player that's ever come through the program, and he's just an exceptional player all around. But Canada had to play without him, and they figured out ways to play without Davies in the team. There's a reason why Jonathan David, despite the clear and present danger being on the field last night, he stayed on until he scored that go-ahead goal. And then right away, his number was up, and Tajon Buchanan scored. It was 2-0, and he came off the field right away. But Jesse Marsh understood winning the group was paramount, finishing on the other half of the draw to Panama and Mexico, the other two top teams in this tournament. So he waited as long as he could. David rewarded him for keeping the faith, and then he got right off the field. Jonathan David is the most irreplaceable player in this Canada team and the best player in CONCACAF right now. There's no question about that.
Argue with us, Americans. Argue with us, please.
I don't think they would.
They
I think
can
a lot
right
of them
now.
they're calling him the best number 9 in CONCACAF, right? Like that. I feel like
Best
that's
player.
across the board. Best
player. We was
Sure.
saying. I back it.
Well, so let's talk about the depth a little bit because reports are indicating that Stefan Eustachio will actually not be rejoining the national team after his club was knocked out of the FIFA Club World Cup. He's in fact going to be heading back to Portugal. So, Jordan, what do you think the ramifications are for Canada as they head into the knockout round and he doesn't appear to be part of the plans moving forward at the Gold Cup?
I really hope Canada will be okay going into this quarterfinal match against Guatemala. But you think, obviously, when you go to semifinal, potentially a final, you want your spine and your best players to be available. That's obviously not the case with Bombito. And then if Eustachio is not here, I still think this is an opportunity. The one part of me was like, you need your best players if you're actually going to win your first major trophy in 25 years. But then the other part of me is Gold Cup, this summer window, is still the time for players to emerge. The players that we didn't know about, the players that Jesse Marsh might have not trusted. You could see that in Saliba and even on our OneSoccer socials as well, just being asked about the fact that he wanted to bring Saliba in, but he didn't. And it's kind of like kicking himself because of the player that he's proving to be. But you look at that midfield, everyone knows if everyone's healthy, Eustachio's probably playing. But it's like, who's partnering with him? But I kind of like what's happening now. Seaguar yesterday, it was a crazy match and so much happened. But him in the midfield, the way that he's moving, the way that he thinks a step or two ahead, I like the options now that this could bring. This could be a time in a tournament where he steps up and maybe solidifies his spot in the midfield. I think, and Wheels, we talked about it as well. In the 23, he's probably there because he's a Swiss Army knife. He can play right back. He can pop into the middle. But starting as a midfielder, I don't think people would have said that before this tournament. So I think it's an opportunity for those type of players, the Kones, the Chouaniers. Chouaniers looked very good as well. Saliba's looked promising. And now you have Seaguar as well, chopping away in the midfield. I kind of like the options that will bring in a must-win match.
Yeah. FC Porto just weren't very good at the Club World Cup. And Eustachio, I think, is doing the right thing by remaining with his club side right now. It's kind of difficult to check in and check out of Canadian camp when you have another tournament in between. I think that this is the salient decision. And let's see what the central midfield options. There's at least 4 of them right now that are all competing to play. And depending on who you ask, there's a different player that should start in the very next game. We know that some of these players now can play against weaker competition. I want to see what it's like if they need to step up in weight class. That's the next test for players like Saliba, Chouanier, Sigor in that area of the field. Even Ismail Kone, I think it's more about consistency than anything else. But if Canada get past Guatemala, which they should, if the United States gets past Costa Rica, it's not a fait accompli, but they'll be favorites heading to that game. The U.S., despite being depleted, have a very good midfield. Tyler Adams, De La Torre, Cardoso, Berhalter. Like, that'll be a good test for any of those Canadian players. So, and look, like, as good as Eustachio is, Canada needs to understand what options they can really count on over the course of the next year. So next man up, that's the sentiment with the back line, and they've done well enough in this tournament. Same thing goes with the midfield as well. So I don't think it's a catastrophic loss. It's actually pretty understandable.
I just think that's absolutely crazy. And not that I'm disagreeing with what you're saying, but I think
I know what you're saying.
it's so crazy that even March getting into Nations League, even before that, when Jesse Marsh first took over, we wondered who was he going to name as captain. And I know a lot, like, Alphonso Davies seemed like the clear and obvious choice, really excellent player, face of the team. But I know I even put my hand up for Stefan Eustachio because he's the heir apparent to Atiba Hutchinson, what he was able to do at the World Cup. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. It was just months ago that we were sitting here saying this team does not have a midfield without Stefan Eustachio.
Yep. Even I totally agree with you.
How has it changed that quickly that we're sitting here going, that's okay? If he's
even
not
at the World Cup and a bit after, it was like the first player on the game sheet, you could argue is Eustachio. And people said like the way that he's barking the midfield, the way that he's led. So to think now, obviously Jonathan David we always knew his potential, but has skyrocketed. But you could make an argument now, Moise Mambito, Derek Cornelius are irreplaceable. Eustachio, you love what he brings and he's still a top-notch player. But like with Jesse Marsh's system, there are other players that can maybe do a job and maybe get by. And it's funny. It's just funny how football works because, it wasn't too long ago. 18 months ago, we were talking differently about Eustachio. And it's not about his quality. It's just about the team and how they've grown and how they're accepting that challenge.
Yeah, but Porto struggled last season. He's been in and out of the team. He needs to ensure that he's doing his part as well, both on the club side and the national team, to ensure that he's playing at the highest level possible heading into the World Cup. I say this all the time, and people think, oh, this is what the 11's going to look like come next summer, or this guy's absolutely in the mix, and this guy's out. Football moves fast. So much changes so quickly. Just like that, the way that we look at players changes in a matter of weeks, not even months. So it's a process that's playing out here. Again, I like what I've seen from these alternative options in central midfield, but I need to see what they look like against really good competition. That's where we'll get a true not Honduras. This group, honestly, Andy, did nothing for me. Did nothing for Canada in terms of their preparations. It got some different players on the field. These three teams in their group were abject. None of them are anywhere close to the competition they'll be playing next summer or in between, for that matter. Yeah. So let's forget about the group stage, move on to something else that hopefully will be more productive.
Quickly, just some thoughts here on facing Guatemala. Any questions that you have heading into that one? What are you expecting from that match, Wheels?
Kind of the same but different. And what I mean by that is I don't think Guatemala will come out to play. I think they're going to sit in a low block, play on the counterattack. I mean, we saw them at the Gold Cup 2 years ago. They've maybe improved a little bit, but essentially the process remains the same. It'll be a tight, cagey game. And this is where I think if Guatemala elects to try to play a little bit more football than El Salvador did, that you'll be a good challenge for Canada because it's about breaking down that low block. When a team is just playing really defensive, putting numbers behind the ball, how does Canada go about breaking them down? So if Canada do have those plans A through Z, then this is the time to kind of show what they might have in their back pocket here. So it'll be a test. It'll be tight, a different kind of game. If you're looking for that free-flowing, entertaining football, unless Canada scores first or scores early, I don't think you'll see much of that. It might be a little bit of a grind come this Sunday.
I guess my $1 million question, Trills and Wheels, is who does Jesse Marsh partner with Jonathan David up top? And I guess all signs are, my spirit is telling me it's going to be Oluwaseyi. Didn't play yesterday. and probably has played and started the 2 games in this tournament already. That's probably his favorite pick. I mean, I'm still wondering why. I don't know, Wheels, I don't want you to be right, but I'm still wondering why maybe Laren hasn't started a match. Is this going to be the match where he starts? But if he doesn't, it looks like it's Oluwaseyi. But scoring early and making sure that they attack well has to be the focus for this Canadian team going into the quarterfinals. Like, get that game done and dusted. You don't want the 70th minute coming and it's 0-0. And that just feeds into the Guatemalans for sure.
Who do you think gets to start, guys? Kripo, Dane St. Clair? We know Marsh likes to go back and forth.
Flip a coin, Chills. I say Kripo. I don't think he was tested at all in this match, and obviously,
was there a shot?
There wasn't. It wasn't tested at all. So, I mean, for me as a keeper, you probably want a game where you're actually getting some shots and getting tested. So you probably play again.
Well, there was the one chance where the player was offside. He headed it wide in the first half. I think
first half there were like 2.
Yeah, but maybe this will be a little bit more of a tell from Jesse Marsh, who he prefers. This is knockout round football. There are elements that can be replicated in terms of big games that are coming up ahead. So yeah, I'm kind of with Jordan on this. I kind of think it'll be Sinclair, but I'm not 100% sure. I think there'll be a lean to Sinclair, but yeah, perhaps this will show what Marsh thinks. I agree with Jordan. Right now, it seems like Oluwaseyi is the guy. Laren just seems to be pushed out of that role. He's essentially Jonathan David's backup. There hasn't been a lot of faith in Jebison. Promised David missed a couple gilt-edged chances as well, and perhaps that's more of what Marsh has been seeing in training. So yeah, it wouldn't be surprising to me if Oluwaseyi was the player coming in. I think he's got a decision at left back. Larea might be just edging out Basong at this point. Same thing with right back. Johnston versus Seagor, 2 really good options there. I think your center backs are taken care of. Central midfield, I wouldn't be surprised if it's Saliba and Chouanier with Buchanan on the right and perhaps Schaffelberg on the left based upon the lack of other options at that position. So yeah, I think I pretty much did Jesse Marsh's work.
You did the lineup. You did the lineup for us.
There you go.
And you know what? We'll find out the real lineup on Sunday, June 29th. That's when the quarterfinals go. The Canadians make their way to Minneapolis to face Guatemala.